Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest demographic shifts in all of human history. This massive, unprecedented move from the countryside to the cities that's happening right now across the developing world.
Just look at that number. 2 billion. That's how many new people are expected to move into cities in developing countries over just the next 20 years or so. It's a scale of migration we've honestly never seen before.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the sheer scale of this urban shift. Then we'll get into why cities are both a huge promise and a huge problem. We'll also cover the informal economy, where millions of people actually work. Then, and this is the big one, we'll unpack the core theory that explains this whole puzzle. And finally, we'll see what smart policy can actually do about it.
Okay, first things first. Let's really try to get our heads around just how big this urban shift truly is. The numbers are just mind-boggling. By 2050, 86% of the world's entire urban population growth is going to come from Asia and Africa. But check this out. In Asia and Latin America, the rural population is actually expected to shrink. This isn't just about cities getting bigger. It's a complete reshaping of how and where people live on this planet.
But what's really wild is the speed of it all. What this shows us is that today's developing countries are becoming urban at much, much lower income levels than Western countries did back in the day. It's happening faster, it's more compressed, and it's a whole different ballgame.
So, you gotta ask, why this powerful pull? What is it about cities that makes them these incredible engines for development? Well, the main economic reason comes down to this key concept right here, agglomeration economies. It's a fancy term for a really simple but powerful idea. Good things happen when people and businesses cluster together. These economies create this amazing virtuous cycle. So think about it. A couple of tech firms pop up, and that attracts talented engineers. That, in turn, attracts more tech firms, which then attracts companies that supply them, and on it goes. Success just keeps breeding more success. But of course, when you have this kind of rapid, often totally chaotic growth, you're going to get a whole host of massive challenges right along with it. One of the biggest issues you see in a lot of developing countries is something called urban giantism. This is when one single city, usually the capital, just becomes overwhelmingly huge, completely dwarfing every other city in the country. And this table just drives that point home perfectly. Look at the US. The biggest city is about 1.5 times the size of the second biggest. It's pretty balanced. Now look at Peru. Lima is 11 times bigger than the next city. This kind of extreme concentration just creates huge problems with efficiency and inequality. And the most visible and frankly heartbreaking consequence of all this rapid, unbalanced growth is the explosion of urban slums. Today, over 1 billion people live in these settlements, often without the basics, like clean water or a toilet. It's a massive humanitarian crisis and a huge roadblock to development. This leads us straight into another key feature of these megacities, the gigantic informal economy. For millions and millions of migrants who can't land a formal job, this sector is their only lifeline. We're talking about everything from street vendors and little repair shops to small-scale manufacturing. It's all legal stuff, but it's completely off the books, unregistered and unregulated. Now, the informal sector is a classic double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a super important safety net. It creates jobs, it provides goods and services for the poor, but on the other hand, it can trap people in a cycle of really low productivity, and its very existence can actually pull in more migrants than the city can possibly support. So this brings us to the central puzzle, the question that stumped economists for years. If there's so much unemployment in the cities, why on earth do people keep coming? The answer is probably the single most important theory you can learn about migration in development economics. So yeah, if you're studying for an exam, this is the part you're going to want to highlight. The whole answer lies in a really simple but profound shift in thinking. The decision to move isn't based on what you are earning or what you're guaranteed to earn. It's based on what you might earn. It's all about expectations. And this whole idea is wrapped up in something called the Todaro migration model. What it does is reframe the decision to migrate. It's not an act of desperation, it's a totally rational economic choice. It's a calculated gamble based on what you expect the outcome to be. So here's the kind of mental math that a migrant does. You look at that high wage you could get in a city job. Then you take a realistic guess at your chances of actually getting that job. You multiply those two things together,
And that gives you your expected urban income. If that number is higher than what you're making back home, well, the rational thing to do is move.
This simple formula, this is the engine that drives the whole model. And it explains that paradox we talked about. Migration keeps happening, even with high unemployment, as long as that urban wage is high enough to make the gamble worth taking.
Let's just run the numbers to make this super clear. Let's say your guaranteed wage in the countryside is $1.50 a day. A modern job in the city pays double, $3, but you've only got a 50-50 shot of getting it. If you don't, you can still scrape by making 25 cents in the informal sector. So your expected urban income is that 50% chance at $3 plus your 50% chance at 25 cents, which works out to $1.62.5. Since that's more than the $1.50 you were making, you pack your bags. See? It's a completely rational economic decision. And understanding this model is so powerful because it completely flips the script on how we should think about policy. Here's the most counterintuitive and important lesson from the model. Just creating more urban jobs is not the answer. In fact, if that's all you do, you can actually make the problem worse because you're just making that urban gamble even more attractive, pulling in even more people. A real solution has to be way more comprehensive. It has to focus on creating a better economic balance between the rural and urban areas, promoting industries that actually hire a lot of people, and fixing problems across the entire economy. The policies we put in place today are going to determine the quality of life for billions of people. They're going to shape the entire future of global development for the next 100 years. And that leaves us with a final, really critical question. As this historic transformation continues, will we be ready?